Carla Rylance. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Mishka. How are you doing today?
Oh, well, you know how I'm doing. We had so many technical issues just before we started that you'd be
Let's
looking
just
at me for
pretend
like
that it's
pretend
fine.
like nothing. Oh, very English of you.
Exactly. Just
So,
smile and nod and it'll all be fine.
no, we keep it real. So, Carla, you are. Let me just introduce you quickly to the listeners.
Okay.
You're an external development expert. You've been 20 years in the industry,
Mm-hmm.
longer than myself. You look much younger than me. So, just
Oh,
podcasting life is
stop.
tough. Podcasting life is tough. You get it's dog years over here, and you
That's
are
too kind.
advisory committee chair at XDS, and you
Yes.
are consultant for XDS Spark. And
Mm-hmm.
today we are going to talk about the XDS Insights Report. Can you just give 2 words, 3 words, 5 words, 20 words about what is the XDS report? Because it was massive. It had a lot of
Yeah,
words in it and a lot of
it
pictures.
did. It did, yes.
And people
So,
can download it from the description below, by the way.
that's perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for
Yeah.
that. And yeah, it's available on the XDS website as well. But yeah, the report was authored by Dave Lamb, and he did an absolutely amazing job on this year's report. As you said, it's full of data. I think there's like 50 pages of external development data in there. And he's executive producer at NetEase, and he's also a member of our advisory committee for XDS. XDS is the External Development Summit. For those who don't know, it's an annual conference that's held in Vancouver every September. Great time of year to visit Vancouver. It's very pretty in the summer and always great weather. We've got a great venue for the conference. It's all focused on external development. So if anyone wants to go and advance their external development processes and pipelines, as well as meet developers and service providers from all over the world, it's like the best place to do it. And every year we release the XDS Insights Report, and it's focused on trends and progress and pipelines and everything to do with external development that you want to know about what's going on in the external development landscape. And right now, I think it's a super important report for anyone who's in game dev to read, because personally, I feel that external development is going to become more and more utilized over the next few years, especially as like we've seen fluctuations in the industry, to say the least, right? So I think that people are going to start considering external development more and more, and like how to do it efficiently, how to do it properly, how to do it ethically. And so, for anyone who is like, I need to learn more about this, the Insights Report is a great piece of information to go ahead and start reading and start getting acclimatized to the landscape. And for those who are already doing external development, they've been reading it for years, and go and see what's changing and what they need to bear in mind for their external development strategies. So yeah, it's a great document. Definitely recommend give it a read. It's very pretty as well.
Yeah,
Yeah,
not the
yeah.
easiest to read because I'm not the smartest person, as anybody listening to this
Oh,
podcast knows,
I
and
can't
it
imagine
takes me a
that.
moment to understand what's happening in the graphs. So I thought that since we're doing so, the report is about like 40, 45 pages or 60. I don't remember anymore the
It's a
number.
large
It was
number,
massive.
yes.
So I pulled I think like 10 slides, and what I'm going to do in this podcast, I'm going to just as we discuss, show some of these slides because the graphs are interesting. It takes a moment to understand, and the graphs will support the conversation. So, folks, if you are listening and you're listening on Spotify, then you can watch the video, or you can just go to the YouTube, subscribe, do all the shenanigans to provide that good boost to the channel. Anyways, enough of the shilling. Let's talk about external development. And
Yes,
the
please.
first, of course, question is like, what has happened really since the COVID boom?
So, it was quite interesting when COVID first came about. I'll just go through a little bit of a story of like my experience from
Yeah.
it. So like when it first came about that we were all going to have to go home from our offices and work from our office for 2 weeks as it was going to be originally. I was working as an external development manager at the coalition at the time, working on Gears 5, and the leadership team came to me a couple of times and actually asked for my advice, because I've been working with people externally to the studio.
Oh, yes, that's true.
For many years. And so they're like, how do we work with our newly distributed team? Because everyone is now remote and everyone's now working from home. So it was actually a really interesting exercise to support that larger team and help them figure out what processes needed to be put in place. And I think that people started to embrace external development a little bit more since COVID happened because of that, because everyone at that point was almost working externally, you know?
Yeah.
And so that was a really interesting exercise. But yeah, since then, I feel like strategies have changed slightly when it comes to external development. I think not only has the COVID boom changed a lot about what we're all doing in game development, but I think it's now changing. The external development is starting to become more of a considered way of flexible and scalable game development. It's also helped the industry to lean more into more mature external development practices. So it's not all so much like, let's throw this work over the fence to an outsourced provider anymore. A lot more game studios are starting to consider how to use external development to make our processes more streamlined, how to bring more value to the games that we're making. So more and more game dev studios are starting to consider co-development style relationships where they're using their external partners to be an integrated extension of their team, which is becoming more and more popular. That word co-development is almost used hand in hand with external development these days, which that's changed a lot over the last 10 years. We started to hear the word co-development about 10 years ago at the External Development Summit, and that's been talked about more and more over the past few years. And I really think it's becoming an integral word within that ecosystem of making games right now, which is really, really great. And then I don't remember the question now. I went off on one. Help me.
So, well, not really. So you talked about the longer trend line, but let me talk to you a little bit about the graph that I'm showing here. So,
yeah.
What we're seeing in the COVID graph, we're seeing a COVID bump in the external development graph, and what we're seeing is 2022. When you look at the columns, it's basically the budgets for over $50 million spent on external development just blows up. Like there was a little bit, and then it goes like what, 5-6 fold, and that amount of large external development spending has pretty much stayed the same. And what we can see proportionally, that there has been less and less of those sort of a smaller external development under 500K, around like between 500 and a million. That has been quite minimal, and instead like these big spenders, as well as the sort of a 6 to 10 million range of external development, has proportionally increased significantly. And according to the other report, it says like 70% of publishers now spend over 6 million a year on external development. So as you said, like the COVID really affected in the sense of the budgets getting larger, meaning that there's more work that is handed over to the co-development or external development partners that are essentially seen as co-development. And that, as you say, brings the flexibility. So less fixed employees that are, well, we know everything about fixed employees, good, bad, good things and challenging things, because you have a lot of success to employ armies of developers, and there's a flexibility with external development. Web stores. You've seen what good looks like, but have you seen great? AppCharge is the direct-to-consumer platform backed by the likes of Supercell and built by monetization pros from Moonactive, Playtika, Huge Games, and others. People who know the difference. AppCharge powers over $500 million in transaction a year for top studios, optimizing every detail. Deeply personalized web store offers custom-made design, industry-leading monetization features, in-game payments, SDK, and more. 70% of top grossing games already have a web store, but the ones scaling fastest, they're doing it with AppCharge. Learn more at appcharge.com.
Heroic Labs is turning 10, and we're just getting started. In a constantly changing industry, we've stayed the course. Bootstrapped, profitable, and proudly independent, our founding engineers still lead the way, driving innovation and stability developers trust. Just like Unity and Unreal transformed game engines, Heroic Labs is doing the same for back-end game tech. Our open source platform, Nakama, has nearly 10 million downloads and powers thousands of games worldwide. Heroic Labs, proven for 10 years, built for the next 10, and beyond.
It's very true. Like, developers are trying to find creative ways to make more efficient budgets and processes. And what's kind of great with all of these amazing external partners that you can find around the world is they've worked with a lot of different developers as well. They've seen a lot of different ways of doing development. They've worked on a bunch of different pipelines on so many different games with so many different clients. They're actually a great resource to chat to and figure out, okay, you've seen this in hundreds of different ways. What can we do with you to make our pipelines even more efficient? So not only are developers utilizing it to create that stability and that flexibility, but they're also using external partners to help find creative ways of creating even more value and even more efficiency. But yeah, this graph is really interesting this year. I mean, spending over that 6 million mark has definitely gone up, and it's been going up since COVID, as you can see here, since like that 2021 year. It's been increasingly going up. But yeah, there's a huge jump in that 6 to 10 million spend bucket this year. There's a slight dip in that 50 million plus spend bucket, which I find interesting. I'm not exactly sure why that is yet, but it's only a small, like a teensy wincy little reduction. But yeah, that 6 to 10 million bucket has grown a lot.
So we talked about the good old budgets and who's making what money in external development, and it's an interesting graph. But the next point that will be interesting to talk about is the use of AI, and of course.
Big subject.
Big subject. Everybody's talking about it, how AI is going to take everything. And you had a really interesting graph here that talks about,
on a different slide, I'm presuming.
Yes, on a different slide. See, I took the wrong one. This is, here it is. So
I mean, this is a really interesting slide. We can continue talking.
Yeah, we can. Oh,
we could always go to AI.
Yeah, let's talk about let's talk about this one. Okay.
Okay.
So, usage of AI in external development. Now, what is fascinating about this one is, does your company utilize AI? And we can see that 78% of publishers do utilize it. And there's interesting changes. There's a publisher and a service provider. And on the publisher side, we can see that their yes goes from 2024 way up in 2025, whereas over 50% are utilizing AI, and 25% are saying not today, but likely over the next year. So really, really soon. And at the same time, the service providers, the external developers, are exactly the same year over year. So only about 27% of service providers, those who are supposed to be, the efficiency boosters, only 27% of them is using AI, and 50% is essentially saying no. They were saying a little bit less than 50% was saying no in 2024, and 50%. So more of these service providers are saying no in 2025. What does this mean?
It's very interesting, isn't it? And I found that the conversation of AI has been slowly like morphing over the past few years at XDS. Like 2 years ago, the conversation of AI at XDS was kind of like, we kind of, no one likes AI. Why is it even here? Like, will it just leave? And then last year, the conversation was more like, oh, AI is definitely coming and I'm curious about it. Whereas this year, the topic of AI with the community is more like, oh, okay, like it's here. I'm already using it here and there, but like, how can I actually use AI within external development to make things even more efficient when I'm working with external partners? So there has been a slow uptake of embracing AI a little bit more. As you said, like it's so interesting here that there's a difference between the service provider and the publisher this year. Like the uptake from publishers of using AI this year has grown, like
Yes,
it's almost doubled, right? And I think there's probably I think there's a lot. AI has become more accessible, I think, at least as well, especially when it comes to writing things. It's almost like you can't access an app without having that there at your fingertips. So when it comes to using AI on the developer side, it could come in use when it comes to writing briefs, for example. Like, help me write this brief for this thing, and it'll give you a template. It's, oh my gosh, look how much time I've saved here. Or it could be, I want to make sure that this email that I'm writing is going to be easily read and understood by someone who lives on the opposite side of the world. You know, it can help make things so much more efficient when it comes to external development, and I think people are starting to take more and more advantage of that. And then on the service provider side, they're probably a little bit more prohibited, because it could be that their contracts that they have in place with their developers or publishers literally say, don't use AI. And it's like, oh, okay, well, I can't, and can I? And so it's probably, I mean, I don't know, it's probably more like they're being told they can't use it, so they can't, you know. But developers probably behind the scenes are like, well, I've been given the okay to do this, but it might just take a little bit more time for it to become accepted for external partners to use it.
I don't know, because like when we look at the top 3 best use cases for the future of AI implementation, again from the XDS report, we can see that when it comes to publishers, naturally publishers are out of ideas, so they use AI. So that's the overwhelming use case is idea generation. The second is concept art, and the third one is QA. QA, by the way, is there's an onslaught on QA. It's horrible.
What do you
mean? A lot of QA people looking for work. Good QA people.
Oh yeah, of course.
Like really good. I've been. Anyways, we're deviating away. That's AI versus QA. It's one is providing a smackdown. And service provider side, we see that the procedural content generation is actually number 1 use case, programming number 2, and concept art number 3. That's another one.
That's a tricky one.
Oh, it's I talked yesterday to a really good art director from one of the top 10 studios, and he kind of whispered to me, because he forgets I'm not an artist. You can like I'm a business person. He's like, you know what? He's like, the work that their AI tools are now doing, internal AI tools, is as good as their concept artists.
Oh man.
I was like, yeah. That's a rough revelation so early in AI.
Yeah, I know. And, these are all, it's so tough because these are all going to hurt people. Like how good this AI is getting in all of these different sections, like idea generation, concept art, QA, content programming. It all affects real people as well. So every single one of these conversations is extremely hard. I think a lot of the conversation when it comes to external development and using AI is like taking the work away that is a grind. The stuff that you don't want to be doing because you want to be spending more time on ideation and the fun parts of game development, and the bits that you don't want to do. See if you can get AI to take some of that load off and do some of that work for you. So that's one of the conversation that goes on in just general game dev as well as external development, really. I've been hearing concept art AI being used to create reference boards or to help add quick ideas to briefs to be sent to external partners to help them do the concept art or the say, for example, like 3D art. But I haven't heard an instance so far where AI concept art has been used as like final pieces.
There has been.
Oh, probably, yes.
Yeah. There were outrages from the developers. I think it was Riot that used. Maybe not. Maybe somebody else.
On a marketing piece.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I read that.
Yeah, and then there were Adidas campaign that was fully made with AI, with dancing, people and so forth.
I've seen some adverts on bus stops and stuff.
Yeah,
where their final art is being. You can just tell, right?
I think I mean, it's like watching on Instagram. It's also like manipulated. It's not.
Yeah.
But yeah. So, and the report even calls out the report calls out that concept art is next. That's pretty brutal.
I know. You're
just straight up telling, like, guys, like, if you know how to make coffee or anything with your hands that doesn't include drawing, now is the time.
Yeah, it's tough. But honestly, like, I think there's still a lot of legal loopholes to get through before we get to that point. I think it's. I mean, right now that the legal conversation of AI is still very hot in the external development community, and right now I get the impression that the community isn't quite ready to go that step further of saying, okay, well, this AI will be used in game. Like, I haven't heard that from the community personally anyway, but in terms of idea generation, creating reference, I've heard that, that's used. It's used, and it can be a really helpful tool.
Yeah.
I'm surprised like localization isn't higher up on this list, actually.
Don't. They're like, shut up. Don't talk about us. Like,
I know. I'm sorry. It's so true. It's so true. And as well, QA is in there. Like, there's some companies out there that specialize in external development AI QA, and it's really interesting.
Listen, AI does podcasts. Like, I've listened to them. They're not that great yet, but so were the concept artists saying.
As this one, anyway.
Yeah, but concept artists were saying that like 3 years ago. Like, this shit never gonna replace us. So I'm now saying, it's not gonna replace. I'm gonna be a PT in 2 years. So. And AI can't replace PT. They try, but that's my get out of jail card. Let's talk about happier things, and that is customer retention. So, top criteria for developers, publishers selecting external partner. That's the graph, and what we can see in the graph, and the question is, like, fewer publishers are really switching partners. Why is that? Because you would assume that the market situation is so tough and you're going to squeeze your external developer partner, maybe change them around, but it's actually vice versa. So 38% of publishers have no intent to switch partners.
It is. I'm not surprised right now. The market is very cautious, I would say. And a lot of developers and publishers are choosing to stick with the partners that they have because, one, like, they're obviously getting the quality that they want right? Because they have this established relationship and it's going well. They've ramped up their teams and they've given them a lot of knowledge. They have a lot of knowledge at that studio that they don't want to lose. It's there. And a lot of those teams, as we talked about earlier, are co-dev. They're integrated. Like they feel like part of the team. And so there probably is a hunger to just stick with what's comfortable. You know what their rates are. You know when their rates are going to go up. You can plan. You know, it's kind of like a nice, comfy bed, right? And then you can kind of scale up with that partner as you need to. You'll have that flexibility. You have that trust there. They're going to, if you've got that great relationship with them, then they'll know how to scale up in the right way and how to do it so it doesn't cause too much of a problem, like scaling up too fast or into an area that might not be the best fit. So I get why people would be more likely to stick with their current external partners as well. Like when you're diversifying the amount of partners that you're working with, it's not as simple as just going, I like that one, let's go with them. You know, there's, if you want to do it properly and if you want to do it ethically, you need to do your due diligence. They need to do a developer needs to do their due diligence on the service provider and vice versa to make sure it's going to be a good fit. There's going to be testing periods. There's going to be pilot periods. There's also onboarding, training, all of that. Like it's a fairly robust undertaking. And when developers are in the position where they're like, let's just stick with what we know right now. Let's be cautious. Diversifying with new partners becomes more challenging, right? But then also at the same time, like I think it is important to diversify the partners that you're working with and to have a selection that you trust and that you know you can go to. Well, it gives you additional flexibility for one, right? But then if anything happens where, say for example, that service provider, like they can't scale up the way you want them to, they're full, like they don't have any capacity, like you then have other service providers to lean on that you can scale up with. But then there's also other situations. Something happens with the service provider and it becomes too rocky for them to actually keep going with that project. And so then you have no external partner. You need to have a pool of multiple really to make things stable when it comes to external development, preferably anyway.
Attention app and game developers, are you ready to unlock the secrets behind the world's top performing apps and games? With Sensor Tower, you get the ultimate competitive edge, whether it's breaking into new markets, fine-tuning your UA strategies, or boosting monetization. Dive into data like never before, track global trends across app stores, analyze market-leading in-app purchase and in-app ad strategies, and benchmark your performance with real-time insight. The best part, Sensor Tower doesn't just deliver data, it helps you turn it into action. With intuitive tools and expert analysis, it's everything you need to make smarter, faster decisions. Thousands of app and game studios, from indie creators to global giants, trust Sensor Tower to help them win. So why not you? Start your free trial today at sensortower.com. That is sensortower.com. Yeah. To summarize a few things, though, the trend is showing that the quality of work, which is the number one criteria, is actually decreasing as the first and most important selection criteria. At the same time, we're seeing that rates are becoming more and more important. So there is definitely that squeeze. And there are a couple of more trend highlights. Like, for example, current established relationship that has increased in value. So as you said, relationship matters. And then we can see that the language and communication has really gone to almost insignificance from where it was more important. And we can see that the security requirements as well as financial stability of the external developer have been much more important. But all of this whole graph can be summarized in the words of a famous Canadian: no new friends. That's that's pretty much it in the trend lines.
I feel like a terrible Canadian. Like,
Yeah,
who said that?
I know. You talk, but you're English. You're allowed not to know. Of
I'm a
course, this is
Canadian as well.
this is the singer songwriter rapper Champagne Poppy, aka Drake from Toronto.
Oh man, I should have known that. Where have I been?
Yeah, well, maybe after this podcast, you should listen No New Friends on a repeat for offending Canadians of not knowing their.
I'm very sorry, Canada. I am now Drake's biggest fan, of course.
No new friends.
Yes. So lots of change in this graph right now. As you said, like, quality of work has dipped a little bit, but I think it's probably, as you said, because it's been distributed in other areas this year. I think quality of work is always going to be, well, I think it will always be the top priority, because you're working with an external partner, because you expect a certain quality of work. And if you don't get that, then that relationship doesn't work, right? Yeah. So quality is always going to be key, 100%, not just quality in the work you get back, but the quality in the relationship that you have, the quality in their communication. Like, there's a lot of it can be bundled into that. But yeah, the importance of rates has slowly been going up. It's at the highest it's ever been this year, and I'm not surprised. Like, especially as there was another stat within the report that was saying that service providers haven't been putting their rates up as readily as previous years either. It's kind of been staying quite consistent. So rates is definitely something that is being more and more considered, especially as budgets become maybe a little bit more strict. Pinched. That's a better word. Pinched. But yeah, I think the really interesting one here is that security requirements, like spiking, and I'm not 100% sure why that is. I think maybe as external development starts to become more prevalent and more used, the more developers and publishers are starting to pay attention to it and start to understand, well, if we're going to be sending more work externally than we ever have before, we need to make sure our IP is safe and our work is safe. And
things
what do we
leaked.
Need to Exactly. So what do we need to put in place to make sure that we can do external development safely and securely? So it's possibly that it's that developers are going, we need to do more of this and make sure we're doing it properly and make sure we have the infrastructure to make it work.
Do you have in-house servers? How is the locks on your offices?
Yeah. Do you
I've gone through IT reviews. It's a quite expensive thing. So
yeah, and so I think and it can be quite an investment for service providers as well, especially if they want to work with, if it's their goal to work with some of these big AAA companies with these huge IPs. Some of the security requirements are quite strict, and I've heard reports from some service providers that it can take them 2 years to get through a security process with a AAA developer because of the amount of gates you need to go through and checkpoints, and then the amount of infrastructure they need to put in place behind the scenes. It can be quite a lengthy process. So if you're like a new service provider on the scene or a smaller service provider, it can be quite tricky to work with some of these AAA companies unless you're dedicated to investing the time and the money into making that work. And so, yeah, there's probably quite a few things that are contributing to that right now. But for me, it kind of shows people are starting to consider external development more and what they need to do to make it work.
Yes. Yeah. Well, to be careful who you work with in the sense, like, don't bite, getting that big deal from a big studio may require a lot of IT development, IT investments, and that's a whole different story. So you have to be of a right size. Anyways, top criteria for why developers, publishers don't work with external partners. This is interesting. Geography, bad previous experience. So geography being number one and bad experience being number two. then cost to externalize, language, culture barriers, lack of expertise to integrate, and pipeline both tied at 25%. That's understandable. So there are a lot of publishers who are just not experienced with external development, and that is the reason why they don't work with external development.
Yeah, it's an interesting niche within the industry, really. There are so many amazing external development managers, directors out there that work for developers, and XDS has managed to harness this amazing community where we can all come together and learn from each other and work and meet with service providers and figure out how we can create the best relationships and processes, pipelines to actually make external development work properly. So XDS for me is like one of the best tools out there for actually being able to elevate what you're doing with external development and make it work for your studio, basically. So when it comes to all of these points, these are all things that we tend to address when it comes to XDS, whether it be on like on stage content, table topics, or whatever else. But yeah, geography and logistics.
Yeah, number one, 50% of like the number one criteria why you don't work with an external partner is geography and logistics. So this is pretty, I mean, there's nothing you can do about it. So it's understandable why the top companies, the roommates, the keywords, the virtuous, I'm blanking, somebody will be mad because I didn't name them.
Names are most of the big ones.
So they have so many locations, and they understand that they got to be everywhere to serve everybody.
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, it also depends on what the developer wants at that time. It might be that for the project that they're working on, they need a partner that they can have highly integrated into their pipeline. They want to have someone that they can talk to every single day or every other day, for example, someone that they can get in touch with whenever they need to help troubleshoot because they're going to be working closely with their team. In those situations, it might be that because of that, they choose to work with a partner that is more geographically close or within a few hours time zone. But then there might be some projects that they're like, you know what we want is for this partner to take full ownership of this level or this feature, or I've got 5,000 outfits I need them to make. And this is how they do it, and they can just go and do it. They own it. In those situations, maybe they don't need someone that is so close. Maybe they can work with a partner that is in a different time zone, that is got everything they need to absolutely fit that work they need to do. And then it might be, okay, well, let's sync up once a week over a call, or we'll come and visit you every quarter and check in and do milestone reviews and things like that. So it depends what the developer wants and needs at the time. I mean, I think that you have to be doing your due diligence properly. And if you're doing your due diligence properly, you can get through those geography and logistics barriers, as well as great onboarding and training as well. Once you've got those two down, like, you can make a lot of these different geographical locations work. You just got to know how to do it right.
Yes. Yeah. 100% agree. Let's talk about devoted studios. Now I remembered. My friend.
They're big.
Yes, that's plus 15 location. I just said that because friend of mine went to work there, and she will kill me if I don't mention them. So also devoted studios. She was like, how did you do a whole podcast and not mention the only? Yes, that's another one. Plus 15 locations all over the world. So anyways, let's talk about the rates of these studios. And we've been seeing a little bit of a softening in the rates of these service providers. So when being asked, have you increased your rates? It has been just going down since 2023. The studios that say yes is down to 30 when it was, almost 70% that were increasing rates. how significantly has the inflation contributed to your rate increase in the past years? Most of them have increased rates, and say, so most of them are saying they have not increased rates, so they were unable to move inflation to their client, which is really bad. So that means their own EBITDA is going down. And then there's a question: do you expect to negotiate rates with your client within the next year? And basically, before 2023, majority was saying yes every year. 2023, it was like 50-50 almost that these studios are saying yes. And then it's been going down. It's like under 50 and closing in on only on like 30% of the studios are able to negotiate rates. So essentially what's happening is that these external studios are earning the same as they were earning years before, and eating the inflation rather than passing it to their clients.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So not a good, like when I look at this, I wouldn't open up an external studio. I'm like, oof, business is looking soft.
I think it's a lot. It's another tricky one. Like, again, I think a lot of it is to do with competition and the fact that we were seeing in that one of those previous slides about developers not diversifying their partner pool as much as they were. So by kind of keeping rates stable, they may be trying to appeal a little bit more to developers by making sure that their rates are lower than they would probably usually have at that point. But yeah, I found it quite surprising too, like the fact that service providers aren't planning on negotiating their rates with their clients. Like, it's declining year over year. Like, I wonder when that will change. Because we also want to make sure that as developers and publishers also need to make sure that when they're doing their due diligence with their partners and when they're setting up new relationships with partners, that they are doing so ethically as well. Making sure that the rates that they're going to be paying their partners are enough to make sure that they are going to be supporting their partners in their studio stability. So that's a big subject for me right now. Like, with these kind of trends that we're seeing, how can we make sure that we are working with external partners ethically and they are getting paid what they are worth? It's something that we should all be, as developers and publishers, should be considering when doing due diligence with their partners.
Well, I don't think it's about ethics per se. Like, this is about business realities. When the business of gaming is not growing, then it's hard to share the pie, larger chunks of the pie, when the pie is not growing. And so that's why the external developers are essentially, have to eat it. And at the same time, as you mentioned, there's more competition. There's more competition because there's less self-publishing. There's less new games. So there's like that's really affecting it. And unfortunately, it's the flexible ones, in this case the external publisher or external developers, that are eating up the cost. And there's also a graph that shows the health of the industry. And essentially what we're seeing here, like, third of the publishers predict no growth in demand for services this year, but that's up from the last year, but that's like not positively up. And when being asked, like, the business optimism between developers and publishers and service providers, so we see that in service providers, there's like in 2023 there is pretty significant optimism. In publishers, less, so they're kind of like coming in behind. And then when we go to 2024, there's the sort of a not optimist and somewhat optimistic grows, and the optimism decreases, as well as the sort of so with the time, it's almost like the publishers are feeling it first, and then the next year we can see that the publisher not feeling optimistic. Then the next year, for sure, external developers are not feeling optimistic, and the publishers kind of show the way. And then finally, the publishers perceive growth in demand for external services. We're seeing that the yes in demand is decreasing and no is increasing. So essentially, they are not seeing that they will be spending more on external services. Today's podcast is brought to you by AppsFlyer, inviting you to dive into their new first of its kind report, The State of Creative Optimization 2025 edition. It's not about how to make creatives. It's about understanding what makes users actually stop scrolling and what emotional and psychological triggers drive performance. Based on over 1 million creative variations and nearly $2.5 billion in ad spend, the insights in the report will help you develop a winning creative strategy. Check out the link in the podcast description below or go to appsflyer.com and search The State of Creative Optimization. That's appsflyer.com.
Yeah, that could be the case. I mean, I think it kind of makes me a little sad that service providers are becoming less and less optimistic as the years go by. It looks as though publishers, though, are becoming a little more optimistic. I mean, it's difficult to stay optimistic when you see so much change happening in the industry all the time. It does become quite worrisome, and I don't know where that's going to go over the next year. But from what I hear from service providers who I've been talking to recently, about 50% of them are around about like 2024 was really, really hard. But 2025, at least now, like at this point in the year, they're starting to see some improvement. So maybe things have become a little bit more stable since the report was released about a month or so ago. We started collecting the data like December and January as well. So maybe things are starting to change a little bit. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed there because, well, we all want to, right?
Well,
yeah.
what, as they say, hope is not a strategy.
I know. I care so much about the community, and I really want to see things improving. But yeah, I think when it comes to the publishers' perceived growth in demand for external services kind of going down, I don't know. I'm personally kind of hopeful, at least as a strategy over the next few years, that developers and publishers will actually start to use external development a little bit more, as I've said, like to create more of that flexibility and scale where they need it, when they need it.
Mm-hmm.
I think like more and more people will start considering that. So I'm personally hopeful that over the next 3 years, we'll start to see that bar start to shift again.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm naturally joking because it's good for my business as well when gaming grows. Like, we kind of have to joke around that because the reality is a bit sadder. But there has been, good games coming out lately, selling really well, which is the most important part. But there's the capital crunch that kind of keeps it away. But nevertheless, external development is the flexibility part. And you would assume that at least in this settings, it would be getting more demand than before because games are bigger and budgets are tighter. So that's when you tend to strategically use external development.
Exactly. And you can use your external development companies as well to help you brainstorm creative ways that you can work with them to create extra pipelines efficiencies as well. As I've said previously, like they've seen so much, they've seen so many games, so many companies, so many processes. They're a great tool to brainstorm what could we do differently to actually make a bigger difference in what we're doing.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest cost for game companies in game development, based on my limited 15 years experience, is that the most expensive thing is when you don't know what you're doing and you're doing it. And that means when you don't know which
you go.
Well, not even that. I mean that you're building a game that you haven't designed fully, that you don't really know what you're building, and you're like, we'll figure it as we go. And then you get into the reality of development, especially with larger companies that have budgets and predictions, and you're accountable for delivering this product that you promised, and you kind of can't really just come back and say, hey, you know what, like I don't think it's going to come in, or I want to pivot. I want to do something else. I don't think this is the right thing. Like I worked with in several publicly traded companies, and they kind of have to inform their slates, and you can't just walk in and be like, we tried multiple different things, but I think I'm going to pull the plug and come up with a new idea. It's just no. They say, hey, no, you gotta gut it out. You gotta get this game out in this quarter that you promised, and
Yeah.
and that's a challenging thing. And so that's where the costs come when you start pivoting, when you start changing things, when you get external developer to build you something, you're like, okay, this was cool, but we're going to a different direction. So now you spend hundreds of thousands going to one direction, then you start going to another direction, and then you say, hey, we need to move faster to all the directions at the same time. So you're now spending even more. And all of this is just, not when you don't plan what you want to do, you end up paying for it. So that's
Oh
my
God, yeah, and especially like external development engagements can range from as we've seen in the money,
oh
like
yeah.
from quite small to extremely enormous.
Yes.
And so having someone there on the developer side and the service provider side that totally understands how to do it well will make things 100% easier. They'll be able to put pipelines in place and strategies. They'll be able to track KPIs,
Yeah.
they'll be able to, they're great experienced external development managers aren't just like amazing producers or art reviewers. They're great at conflict resolution and communication and
Yeah.
relationship building, networking. They are amazing creatures. And if you can get the right ones in place at both sides, that's when you can really make external development a very efficient part of what
Yeah.
you're doing with game dev.
But they're also not magicians. Like you can't just come in to them and say, "Hey, I'd like to have a top 10 grossing puzzle game."
No.
No, no, no. You design, we build. What do you want, sir?
Yeah.
Ma'am, you have to know what you're asking for. Like that, yes, they can produce all the content. They can design many things, but nevertheless, you are the one ordering the dish. So yeah, I've
It's
seen also
true.
I've seen situations where reputable companies have essentially just resorted to going to external developers with a pretty high and mighty ask, and those external developers were like, okay, well, we'll do it. Like, sure,
Hmm.
we'll make
Mm.
you. I'm just going to throw it out like a puzzle game, and that game is not going to be outstanding. It's going to look good. It's going to play good, but it's not going to be anything special because
Mm.
you didn't invest into it in a sense of finding what's the specialty about it.
Well, yeah, there has to be a good vision and there has to be a good product.
Yeah, yeah, and they can copy any game, but they would be self-publishing if they would have the magic sauce.
It's quite interesting as well, like the different types of external development and how they relate to a developer's vision as such. Like when it comes to traditional outsourcing, the overall vision is like mostly with the developer, right? They're like, do these things for us. These are the very strict specifications. Here's the brief. Do it like
Hmm.
this. Here's the package. Go ahead. It comes back and you review it and you put it into game. Then when it comes to code development, that's when that more ownership does go into the service provider's hands. It could be
Yeah.
a case like we gave the example earlier of like, okay, we'll give them this level to build, and it could include art assets, it can include design, it can include VFX, lighting, audio, like everything. And that's when you do start to put more trust into that service provider. And maybe it's a case of you give them a small brief, you give them the vision, you give them the goals, and they go ahead and do it. But then there's also full development where the full game is in the partner's hands, and you are just giving them the vision of the game, what you want from it, and what the product needs to succeed. and you leave all of that in their hands. And that's a very different style of external development. It's a delicate balance of giving them the right amount of control, but then also not the developer or publisher not being too overwhelming, that you're taking over their DNA and what they're bringing to the game themselves, because you've chosen that partner because you love what they do, right? And you want to invest in them to make this full game for you. So that's when it becomes an extra level more difficult, I would say, because you have to balance ownership with making sure that you're not overtaking what they're trying to bring to the game at the same time.
Yeah, I've had the best experience when we were very strategically using external developers. So, for example, in the art pipeline, this was in a hero creation, playable hero creation pipeline. We had our internal art team, like when it went from concept to modeling to rigging to animation to VFX and so forth. And what we did is, because this was a smaller team, but we hired very senior people, and essentially the person who was rigging was also supervising maybe one or two other riggings that were happening in parallel with external development. So external developer weren't doing anything that we weren't doing internally, but our guys were building themselves and also leading an external team that was essentially creating parallel pipelines to their development. And so this small team internally that was very senior was able to produce a lot more content than it would be seen if you'd walk into a studio. Like, how did you make so many heroes? Like, well, technically you don't see the 30 other that are working in parallel. But at the same time, it was important for me. I don't know if this is security or other elements. It was just important that we're not throwing money away. We're not asking anything that we couldn't build ourselves. And also it gives more responsibility to the senior talent in their own craft, that they're actually leading a team that is doing multiple things in parallel. And then they were able to choose what we want to do internally, which were the coolest stuff. And then I'm going to give this to the external guys.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I've seen it before as well, where you are working with like an art manager or a senior artist, for example, and they are working with these external artists and showing them what they need to do. And it's almost a track for an art director in a way, because you are art directing the external partners. And it's actually like, people don't think of it that way, but it's actually an interesting way to learn about the art of art direction.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
It's at least a lead. And so that way you're having, and it's also an easier lead than internal development, because hey, guess what? You don't need to have one-on-ones and you know, you don't need to know the name of their kids. You're literally just doing the craft. And you could say that's a good thing, you could say that's a bad thing. It's efficient. You know, it wasn't that they didn't care about each other, but they talked about work and they did the work, and that's it.
Yeah, I mean, you do get some developers that create those really close bonds with the studios that they're working with, whether that is like they'll go to the studio and they'll do training, and they'll have they could have like social gatherings and really getting to know each other. And that I've seen in the past that does actually positively improve the work that you're doing, but not everyone does it. And
I
you
think
don't need to have one-on-ones. I mean,
I think that's the difference between outsourcing and co-development. So we've also worked with co-development. You're essentially taking the full studio, and that studio is part of your. And we've had one where we had a very small team in-house. Then we had a co-developer in another country, and then we had external outsourcing partner that was just cranking the content and you know, far away. And so yes, with the co-developer, the relationship was naturally totally different than with the external outsourcing partner. With the co-development, they came to the studio every month, every quarter. We did business planning, but on their side, it was essentially the full studio working on it. But we didn't do the same with the folks who cranked the content, and they might have even interacted more with the co-developer than with us at the HQ.
Yeah, I guess it depends on the developer and what they want to get out of the
Yeah.
partner and how complex the work is, how long the engagement
Yeah.
is. If it's like a multi-year contract and you're going to be working with a large team of theirs and they're working on something very important for the game, maybe it's wise to invest time in having that strong connection and going in person and doing the training. But if it's something a lot smaller or maybe something that isn't as prevalent in the game
Yeah.
you're making, maybe developers would choose not to.
Exactly.
Depends.
Co-development, you have to bring them close, and essentially their goal is to get a master agreement at some point, and
Mm-hmm.
through that, get acquired. That's the path.
Bingo.
That's the path. And with with the outsourcing partners, maybe one day they can become co-development, but they need to be full houses. So usually outsourcers, they might be focused on art, they might be focused on a specific craft, and in that sense, that's not even their goal. They're just doing their craft and doing it extremely well, and being the preferred partner for this specific thing, at least. But what do I know?
True.
So
Sounds like you've worked with quite a few external developers.
I know. I'm
Here and
older than yeah. So final thing here and there, a few million spent on that stuff. Why developers and publishers work with service providers? So this was like basically what we've been talking about, and the question really is external development now central to how games are made at scale? And what we can see in this graph, basically, as you said, like flexible skill set, ramp up and down. This is crucial because all the time that you're waiting for, that animator or whoever you need in your workflow, that you can actually outsource or work with an external developer to keep moving forward. But yeah, what are some of the other reasons why developers and publishers work with service providers?
Well, I think that, let me just start with this.
Yeah.
I think, as I've said about 50,000 times already, I think external development is going to become a central part of game development. I think as developers, core teams have become more core over the past few years, it makes logical sense to work out how to do XDev well and use that flexibility to create capacity and skill set when you need it and for how long you need it. These external partners, they get stability from having multiple different projects all at one time and supporting multiple different developers and publishers. So it makes sense from both the development side and the service provider side. But yeah, building flexible skill set ramp up and ramp down is definitely number one. I think it makes perfect sense in the landscape we're in today. That flexibility when you need it is absolutely integral. And yeah, I think it's going to become more and more prevalent over the
Yeah.
next few years. That's my prediction. We will see.
I think you're correct. 63%, according to this report, cite cost saving as the number one reason. So it doesn't look like the growth is just around the corner, and that means austerity is very much in vogue, and that means the use of external developers who are able to deliver quality work on time, on budget, that they will sustain and keep their position in the market. So that's how I see it as well.
Yes. Good. Perfect.
Well, Carla, thank you so much for going through this very insightful and information-filled report with me.
You are so welcome. As you said before, you have a link to the report, and
Yes.
there's the XDS website as well. You can go and download it from there if you want to read more. There's lots of very interesting facts and stats through that report. So I recommend everyone go ahead and give it a read. And if anyone wants to learn more about XDev and how you can use it, we've got the XDS conference coming up in Vancouver in September as well. So check that out. And if anyone wants to talk XDev, message me on LinkedIn. I am right here.
Yeah, just grab a cup of tea and you can have a conversation. Lovely cuppa.
And a biscuit.
Yeah, this is really unrelated. This is not a diss. We had a conversation about tea, so we're like, this is how rude.
No. You already understand my love of tea and how specific I am about it, so it's fine.
So reach out to Carla and learn more about external development. It's if you're not doing, you should be. I mean, I think you should be. It's a great cost saving and a way to move faster. And if you're doing, I'm sure there are ways you could do it better, but at least understanding the trends where this part of the industry is evolving is very beneficial.
This is a good time to start strategizing and working out the best way of you utilizing fresh ways of tackling the games you're working on. I'm obviously very passionate about this subject. So if anyone wants to reach out and chat more, I'm right here.
Yeah. So on that note, Carla needs to listen to Drake, and we are finalizing this podcast recording. So thank you everybody for listening, and just remember, no new friends. So on that note, goodbye everybody.
Thank you everyone. Thanks for having me. Bye.
You did it. You made it to the end of the episode. As a fan of the show, it would help us out if you'd subscribe and leave us a review on the podcast service of your choice. Those stars and likes, while a small action on your part, mean a lot to us and help to grow the show. More importantly, are you a member of the Deconstructor of Fun Slack group? If you have 5 years or more of games industry experience, go to deconstructoroffun.com/Slack and apply to join. Join the games industry best professional community filled with peers always willing to lend a hand, or subscribe to our newsletter to get all the latest insights from the Deconstructor of Fun content creators. Thanks for listening.